This is Bryce King, and this is my video on Chapter 5 with talking about school violence and video games that students play when they're at home. Three things that I'm going to talk about that I've either witnessed or have heard about recently. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is the playing of video games. Last year and this year I've also had some encounters with students when asking about what they did over the weekend. They'll say they played video games, and I'll ask them a little bit about the video games and what the intentions are and what are the expectations of the game to get further within. And a lot of times they'll just say, well, I didn't really play the game the way it's supposed to. All I did is I blew up people. And so I kind of ask them why that seems to be fun to them, and they never really can answer it. So I kind of feel like that's my time and point to say, those video games don't really teach you a whole lot, and instead they're teaching you bad habits that you're not going to want to use when you get older. It may not change their mind on the game, but at least I feel like I've communicated to them a little bit about, why those games are bad or, why they're not positive. The other thing that I want to talk about is dating violence. And we have a lot of students in our school that date each other, and then when they come to school, they're allowed to hold hands and such in the hallways. However, it can be very controlling. There's some kids that will make their boyfriend or their girlfriend walk them to class, which will then make them late for their other class. And it kind of just becomes a mind game where if it happened, they happen to break up, it's devastating to them. And I know one of the girls that I used to coach, she broke up with, or her boyfriend broke up with her, and she spent a long time recovering and cried all day in school and all day in practice, and it was just the end of the world to her. And luckily she didn't go any further and decide to take it to the next level where she committed suicide. And there's a lot of teens these days that feel like life is not worth living if they're not with them, and tend to take their own lives. And then the other thing that I would like to talk about is bullying. And you see it more and more these days that students are mean to a certain group of students or to a certain student. They could be the leaders of a group that are mean to a certain student, and it can be very damaging psychologically to that student. One thing that I've done to help show what bullying does is about this time of year, January, February, we get to the point where all of the students are kind of they're tired of, being nice to each other, and all they can do is they bicker. And so a lot of times there's a lot of kids that get really hurt with this. So my project that I do is I have the students take out a piece of paper, and I have them say, some nice things to it. I like your hair. I think you're fun. I like to play with you. And then I have them take that piece of paper and crumple it up. I have them, step on it, throw it across the room. I have them spit on it, whatever they want to do. And they just think it's a good time. And they kind of laugh through it, and I kind of let them, and then I tell them to pick up their piece of paper and have them go through and try to straighten it as much as they can as they first got it. They have to make sure that all the crinkles are out. And so they think it's a fun game that, within the first minute that they can't do it. And so finally, after a minute is up, I tell them to stop, and I tell them to look at it. And I tell them to make their observations and ask them, is it the same as what it was before? And they said no. And so then I go into saying each time that you tell a student that they're ugly or they're fat or anything like that, that it puts a scar on them like it does this paper. And after a while of lecturing, it really hits home to them, and I've seen an improvement that lasts through the end of the school year. Now, because I don't know what they do the next year, with those same groups or whatnot, but at least it kind of makes them a little bit aware of what is said to them. So that's kind of my take on school violence and the three things that I've seen or witnessed. Thank you for listening.